Hey guys, it's Chris with Drop Dice. So I'm back with you again. Unfortunately, the last video, the sound cut out. My headset just stopped getting anything to it. So I fixed that, but we are back. This week, what I want to talk about is, first off, what happened last week. I started a new job. My schedule's been kind of crazy, and I'm about to switch to a new schedule again. But the bright side about the new schedule is it is more solid, and I've just been having a little bit of trouble getting work, the website, the channel, and everything lined up. So kind of bear with me here for the next couple weeks, and once I get everything back on pattern, I may change some recording days, but I still want to get you guys the same level of content that you've come to expect from me. So I mentioned it in one of my previous videos. I have made it to 300. That is super spectacularly awesome. So I really wanted to commit some time to come back here Wednesday and come in strong with a good video. So what we're talking about today is Roses and Thorns. Last week we talked about how you could play a trope and how to expand that trope. Now, by now, you guys are probably super excited to get started playing if you haven't already done so, and maybe you're catching these after your first game or two. A lot of GMs, especially in the Tabletop One-Shot group, Tabletop RPG One-Shot group on Facebook, which I'll include a link in the description of this video once I am done. We do a lot of what's called Roses and Thorns, or maybe pros and cons, or question and answer at the end of every game. And basically what it is it's a chance for you as the player to talk to the GM directly and tell the GM, hey, this is what I thought about your game. Now, the problem that I see is a lot of GMs will go in with the understanding that they've been playing for a while, and they'll talk to players, especially newer players, and they say, hey, I'm really interested in what you thought about the game. Well, a new player usually doesn't have a whole lot of stuff in the background to compare it to, and so what we usually get is a lot of, oh, I had a lot of fun. That was really cool, or maybe, yeah, that was fun, and that's kind of the end of it. So my video today is going to talk about the Roses and Thorns process and some things that you could do to kind of improve your feedback for both your GM and for you, so that you can find that you can coach your GM to the type of game that you want. Ultimately, it's a shared story process, so the GM is going to attempt to coach you guys to the story he wants, but at the same time, you're coaching him to the story you want. So together, you'll come to kind of this happy medium that it's a story that both of you want. And sometimes that happens very quickly, and sometimes it's a slow process. If you guys can hear some scraping sounds, I apologize. My dog's got new bones today, and they're super excited. I think Javi's really close to me right now, so I keep seeing my mic flick up every so often, and I think that's him scratching, so I do apologize about that. But so when it comes to Roses and Thorns, let's talk about critiquing and how to critique properly. You guys, I've mentioned it before, I went to school for art, and so half of my education was about how to maintain and hold a critique. And the idea is that a critique doesn't have to be always positive. That's something that you learn in elementary school, that if you're going to critique someone, you should encourage them, and you should do that. And in art school, you learn how to critique as an adult, which is not necessarily the same style. You should be constructive, but you don't have to be like suggestive. So here's an example. So let's say, you look at a piece of work that I've done, and you go, oh, okay, so I can see what's going on here. But the question I have is this one portion up here in the upper right-hand corner, it looks a little disconnected. It doesn't quite fit with everything. You might want to try maybe kind of blending that in, or changing your shading pattern so that it matches up with the rest of the piece, something like that. Now, what I've done is I haven't done the compliment sandwich. That's how a lot of people learn how to do critiquing, is they go, your game's really good, but I had a problem with this. You could change it like this, and then this other thing was really good. I don't really care for that style, because it doesn't get me the things that I'm looking for as a GM, and I kind of want the bullet point list, like, hey, I like this, hey, I didn't like this. So my first point is, when you do the critique, don't feel like you have to fluff it at all. You can be very forward and very nice and direct about your commentary. You just say, hey, this is why I didn't like something, or this is why I did like something. But always provide why you do or do not like something, because that's the important bit for the GM. Like just saying, hey, I wasn't really feeling this game. Why weren't you feeling this game? Was it something personal, or was it something that the GM did? And if it's something that the GM did, what could he have done to change it, or what parts just rubbed you kind of wrong and didn't give you the experience you were hoping for? That's kind of my first bit of advice, is using critiques for the tools that they are. Now, my second bit of advice is, I think a lot of GMs don't ask enough questions, they get the feeling that that you do with seasoned players. Seasoned players, I can end the game and go, hey guys, you guys got any thoughts, comments, questions for me, suggestions? And they'll go around the table. And generally, I'll get like one or two things. And then if I did something really cool, my favorite part about the GM is getting that feedback that this was really cool. Um, like when we did the wedding game, Chepe said that he thought it was really cool to be able to do the fortune, and he didn't know how his character should interact because talking gods in L5R is not common at all. It's the first time I've ever done it, and I've been running L5R for since first edition back in 97, I believe is when I first got a hold of the books. They came out in 96. I got it like early 97. So, I mean, I've been running it for that long, and I've never done Kami before or fortunes. Well, I've done Kami when you communicate with them through the spells, but I've never done a fortune who manifests himself in front of the players. So that was a lot of fun. And, you know, getting that feedback that, hey, this was cool, I really liked that, is good for the GM simply because it lets them know what you're interested in. Now, if there's on the flip side something you didn't like, let's say from another game, hypothetical, because I'm drawing a blank here as to something that I've done wrong, which I'm not saying that I haven't done anything wrong. I've done plenty wrong as a GM, so don't feel like anybody is perfect at all, especially in this hobby. But let's say, you know, I screw up an NPC's name, and I keep renaming the NPC or something, and you bring it up in the game and you're like, hey man, I really like this NPC from the tavern, but you kept changing her name. And I'm like, oh man, you know, you're right. I tell you what, let's talk about it real quick because we're gonna come back next week. Let me rewrite the name down, that way I've got it here, and put down some bullet points. Or I'm gonna throw it inside our Google group. Something like that is good because it lets the GM know, hey, I don't know what's going on, but you seemed a little distracted and you couldn't put the full focus on the game. It draws the GM's attention to what things that he needs to improve. It's kind of like that example where I was saying that there was a disconnected portion of his painting. There's a disconnected portion of his story, and so directing his attention to it does help things. As far as the questions go, these are the questions that I personally like to have answered. Just as kind of a checklist thing. What was the thing that you really enjoyed in the game? Because like I said, that's a good tool for me as a GM to see what kind of stories you want to play. And then I ask you, what was there anything that you didn't like about the game? And usually we'll get that out of the way, and that's usually a pretty solid yes no answer. And sometimes there is something, sometimes there isn't. And you know, it kind of depends on the severity. Like I said, just be kind of direct and forward, and you'll get through Roses and Thorns just fine, and the GM will get everything that they need out of it. So what did you like? What did you dislike? And then lastly, you know, what was something cool that another player did? I like this one because in a game, a GM coaches you, you coach them, and then eventually you create the story that you all want to be part of. But the reason I like the what did somebody else do that was really cool for you during this game, the reason I like that is because it helps establish self-confidence from the other players. Like, you can have a lot of seasoned guys, maybe the seasoned guys won't do it because they played with each other, they understand each other's strong suits and stuff like that. But I think when a new player comes in the group and, you know, everybody else in the group goes, hey man, you know, that fight scene where you flipped over the table and you kicked it at the bad guy to buy us time to get out of the inn as it was burning, that was super cool. And then the next guy goes, yeah, that was totally cool, but my favorite part was like the scene afterward where we're doing the chase scene, and you know, you reeled back and shot that crossbow bolt at the dude who was chasing us, and we were able to get that last assassin off our tail. And then your fourth player, because, you know, he's talking about the one that is new here, he comes forward and he goes, you know, the action scenes were really cool, but I think, you know, Chris, your best moment in game was actually at the very beginning when you narrated your intro. I thought it was very good. It was very intriguing, and we got a good feel for your character first coming in. And I think that if we were to add that to our little Roses and Thorns session, that would actually really help the process for other players. So I really encourage you to mention, like I said, something the GM did right, something the GM did wrong, something the players did right. I'm going to stay away from what the players did wrong because I think that's counterproductive, unless it's something that was like absolutely destructive for the story of the game, and you kind of want to address it and be like, hey man, what happened in this scene, because like I thought we were all on the same page, and then you instantly turned and you were doing this other thing, and you know, it kind of put a damper on what I was planning to do in the role play. If you address it like that instead of just being accusative and pointive, and accusative and pointing at, I don't, you guys know what I mean. Instead of being like that, you definitely get a different feel for the conversation. That player, maybe that player just got a text message that says your mom's in the hospital and they got distracted, and like that's what caused it. Like they look down at their phone for a minute and they're like, your mom's in the hospital, and then they come back and they're like, yeah, whatever, and they, because it's like the last 5 minutes of the game anyways, and maybe they just tank it right at the end. You don't know what's really going on. Just like, you know, check in. These guys are going to be your friends for a while, and if you're playing in groups like the one-shot group, chances are you're going to see them all the time posting about different things, having conversations and stuff like that. And as always, my general point of advice is be respectful. You don't have to be like friends with everybody, but you should be genial and respectful with most anybody you game with, just as a general note. And usually when you find your own personal group, you guys can control and be disrespectful to each other to a certain extent, because it's you know, it's everybody hanging out, having a good time, poking fun at each other, stuff like that. That tends to happen with gaming groups. So, I mean, you guys see it in my L5R game. It's just a bunch of guys who like playing tabletop games. We've been playing together for like 5 years, so we've got inside jokes and stuff like that I don't mean to keep the viewers out of the loop, but sometimes something will be said and then we'll be like, that's funny, and then we'll move on and we'll never explain it. It's kind of a bad thing for an entertainment value show, but at the same time, this is us naturally. And you'll have that inside your games too. Next week, what I want to talk about is role play. I've talked about ways to get involved as a new player in role play. I'm going to actually include a link to a video where I discuss that, if I can find it, inside the description for this video and in the cards to this video, which will be in one of the corners. I'll figure it out one of these days, but not today. It will be in one of the corners, and it will talk to you about different tips that I have about how to get involved in your game. But I think I'm going to explore that a little bit more than I did in the first video, and I think I'm going to talk about types of role play. And I think what we're going to start with is the intro, like how to introduce your character. What I do, what I like to do, and some of the things that I do to get kind of in the mood of playing a character. And you may find that those are helpful to you. If they're not helpful to you, I will have some suggestions for you for people to go check out and see what their opinions are, because some of them I think are better opinions than me as far as like how they articulate the process. Like I do very similar things to them, but I think they explain things a little better than me. And one of which is Maps and Dragons. His videos, when you watch them, you got to understand they're a little bit comical. The way that they're done, it's done in almost a overly serious tone, and so it's kind of funny at the same time. But a lot of the advice that he gives is super solid, so I would definitely check out his videos. Juice does some good videos, especially because Juice has pretty much cataloged his whole journey as a new player to a GM to an experienced seasoned person at the role-playing table. I know his channel is taking a break, but I would definitely check out some of his videos that he's talked about his role-playing experience, how he developed characters, and as kind of a good kind of evolution of playing a game. Both Juice and Nate from the Provokers started as very kind of relatively newer players comparatively to some of the more experienced people that we have in the one-shot group, and they've evolved by leaps and bounds, and you can totally see it. And so my basic premise about this series is basically kind of helping you guys out with some quick, dirty pointers to get you on the right track for success, because honestly, you guys can do this as much as anybody else. And I look forward to seeing you in some of my games. I've done some one-shots at L5R. I've got requests for more of them coming up. And I may be doing a second little mini campaign or possibly something longer, depending upon the interest of the game, coming up probably December, if I was to kind of eyeball it. I'm not going to set an exact date just yet, because I am invited to play in a newish game, The Besieged. You guys saw Arco for it. We did some changing. I'm going to put out another video that talks about what's going on with Besieged and introduces the new character I'm playing, because we decided to change some characters around, and I'm no longer playing Arco. Instead, I'm playing a character called Garael, and we'll go into details about him in another video. Probably not tonight, however. unless I feel edgy and decide to do it at 2 a.m., which if I do and I get a viewer, awesome. If not, I will catch you guys on the channel. As always, guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for 300. And, of course, I will see you guys at the gaming table.